Thankful. Thank you again, Ken and Jody, for doing such a phenomenal job filling in while I was gone. That was awesome. But today we're going to land this bird that we started a few weeks ago on marriage. Married people that are here today, I want to ask you a simple question. How many of you married someone that wasn't quite like you? Or maybe a lot not like you? Raise your hands high. Okay. Have you heard the old saying that, when you're dating, opposites attract? They really do. But when you get married, opposites attack. Because all of a sudden, all those little things that are different about the other person aren't quite as cute as they used to be, and it can cause some conflict in your relationship. I mean, some of you are very, very punctual with your time, like I kind of am in my family. And then there's those of you that are very creative with your time. That have no concept of what time is. That was cute at one time, but might not be cute anymore. Or some of you are spenders. How many of you are the spenders in the family? Be honest. Okay. And some of you are the savers. Who's the savers around here? Yeah. Ever had any tension over spending and saving? Never happened to any of you? If you're both spenders, you're in big trouble. If you're both savers, you can, well, whatever. You can't enjoy life as much, I can just tell you that. You got to have a balance there. How many of you you just like everything to be planned out? Got to have a plan. Raise your hands high, okay? We had a word for that when I was growing up. You can't use it anymore, so I won't use it here, but I'll use it in private. But you have planners. It's got to be a list. You got to have everything figured out. And then there's those of us that are kind of spontaneous and spur of the moment. How many of you are spontaneous people? A lot more fun with spontaneity, isn't it, Jim? Yeah, because let's just get up and go. We don't plan a vacation. We just get in the car and say, let's head out of here. I'm not quite that bad. Stefano, who's back there running our camera, if you ever talk to them, that's how he says they take vacations. They get in the car and just decide. And I go, wow, that is really spontaneous. That's different. Okay? That would drive my wife nuts. I tried to plan for her a spontaneous trip. I was planning this cruise to Alaska, and I didn't want to tell her about it. And when she caught wind that maybe I was doing that, she started chewing me out for not telling me about it. Not because we were going to go, because she likes to spend the time planning and thinking about the trip, because that's half the fun for her. And so I've learned that I don't plan things without telling her. I just wanted to surprise her, so no big surprises. I told her, honey, the next big vacation we take is on our 50th wedding anniversary, and we're going on a cruise or to one of those all-inclusive places for our 50th anniversary, and we want to take our whole family with us and just get to celebrate. That's only a few years away, so if you'd like to donate to the fund for John Robinson's 50th anniversary, it's only 3 years away. You can help me get there. That would be great. But no, planners, but what happens after a while? This was all cute when you were dating, and it doesn't get so cute later, does it? Becomes annoying, and you start picking at each other about it. And often in marriage, we end up in conflict, not over big stuff, but over little stuff that piles up. And so how do we handle that? What do we do with that? How do we have the right perspective about how do we get through this, and are we going to make it through it? Because we enter into marriage so many times, and so many couples do this, filled with love and with this idea that everything is going to be great, and then they end up in divorce court. How does that happen? And what would God have us to do as followers of Christ when it comes to that? So that's why we started this whole series. Okay, there's 5 things we said we were going to talk about, and they're in your handout, but let's just say them together. If we want to have healthy marriages, there's 5 things we need to do. The first thing is what? Seek God, right? That means God is my number 1, my spouse is my number 2, and we will seek the number 1 with our number 2. We will spend our life seeking God together, because without God at the very center of relationships are almost doomed for failure. And even if they survive, they will not thrive the way God would have them thrive. So with God at the center, things begin to change. And secondly, we talked about learning how to fight fair, right? So if you're going to fight, you learn how to fight fair, and you learn how to fight together, not against each other, but together against the real enemy, the one that's trying to divide you. So you fight for your marriage, not against your marriage. And so you learn how to fight fair. Then Ken and Jody talked about having fun in relationships, married relationships, and they talked about, being able to stand side by side and walk hand in hand, and then what? belly button to belly button, which is the fun part, okay, of marriage. Don't look at me like that. It's okay. You can talk about that. I mean, God gave us that for enjoyment. So we learn how to make sure that in life we're having fun with our spouse. And what a boring life it would be if you didn't have fun together, right? So you learn how to have fun together. And then last week, Ken talked about staying pure. Probably the biggest challenge of marriages in our world today is purity. Because it is a click away from impurity every time you open a browser. Just a click away from impurity. Anytime you get an email that looks suspicious to you, you don't know what it is, you can click it and find yourself seeing impure things that you didn't even ask for. I mean, it happens all the time and can lead down paths. And our attitudes today about marriage are so upside down from the way God had it initially. How did people, they would meet each other, they would court each other, they would start talking about marriage, they would get married, then they would have sex, then they would have children. And what do we do today? We meet somebody, we sleep with somebody, we decide to move in with somebody, we buy a house with somebody, then we get pregnant, and then we decide whether we want to get married or not. And that's what the world does. And we have these challenges to stay pure. And it's not just about purity that comes from not having adultery. It's having a pure thought life, a pure life in the way that we look at the other person and how we honor the fact that men and women are different, and that we don't allow thoughts to come in our minds. Because Jesus, he took purity to a whole new level. It was basically, hey, don't commit adultery. And Jesus said, don't you dare even lust after someone. Because that's impurity, and it ruins relationships. So you learn how to put boundaries in your marriage to keep you from going down those paths. You make decisions in advance so you don't have to make them in the moment, so that you can stay pure. Purity is so, so important. But today we're going to talk about the fifth and final component of that, and that is to never, ever give up. Never give up. Never give it. Now, I want to qualify this, because some people say, you're telling me to never give up, but I'm in an abusive relationship, or a friend of mine's in an abusive relationship. I'm not talking about abusive relationships. If you're in an abusive relationship, or you have a friend that's in one, I think it's perfectly appropriate for people to separate and seek help to try to heal what's going on that causes the abuse in the relationship. I think that's perfectly acceptable. You don't have to be someone else's whipping post. God never asked you to do that, and that's not what I'm talking about today when I say never, ever give up. Okay, so aside from that, if you're here today and maybe you lost a marriage, meaning that you were married and maybe your partner did things that ruined the marriage, and now what you didn't ask for, you found yourself now unmarried, and then maybe you've remarried or you're still single, or maybe you were the person who caused those things to happen. Remember what this series title is, From This Day Forward. It doesn't matter what you did in the past or where you were in the past or what happened in the past. The issue today is, from this day forward, what are you going to do different? How are you going to make sure it's different? How are you going to make sure that you survive and thrive in your relationship? How do you never, ever give up and not go through what you have been through before? And for those of you who have not been through that, thank God you haven't, but you could face the challenge of those decisions. And how do we walk through those challenges in life? And that's what we want to talk about today, never giving up. And I want to look at a section of Scripture out of Matthew chapter 19. And just realize this section of Scripture, Jesus is being kind of put upon by the Pharisees who are trying to trip him up and find a reason to discredit him, and if they can, basically kill him. And here's what they said. Matthew chapter 19, verse 3. It says, some Pharisees came to Jesus to do what? To test him. Okay? They asked, and don't go too much further than this verse yet, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason? Now stop right there and understand what Jesus is being asked. Because in the culture of the day, whether it was right or wrong, and it was definitely very wrong, women had basically no rights, and they were thought of as a piece of property, not much different than a cow. And that's not saying women are cows. They were property. And if you didn't want that property anymore, you just got rid of it. That's what you did. And you got something else. And so they're saying, hey, look at this. They asked, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife? Is it lawful do it for any and every reason? And what Jesus says in response flips their whole world upside down. Because they had this idea that if I don't like you, I just have to say, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you 3 times, give them a certificate of divorce, and it was over. That was it. That's how you did it. And Jesus says this in response. Haven't you read, he replied, that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two shall what? Become one flesh. One flesh. That's such an important statement for us to say. It goes on to say, so they are no longer 2, but 1. Now, I want you to understand what he means by it. He's not saying that you lose your identity and you lose your personality, and you don't lose yourself when you become 1. You become a whole new unit that is different. You still have your individuality, but you are still one together. And that's why he says, this is such an important concept for us to get that God has put you together for a reason. That's why he said, therefore, who has joined together? God has joined together, let no man separate. What God has joined together, let no man separate. Divorce is a horrible thing. I can't tell you how many times I have seen divorce have devastating effects on the husband, the wife, and especially on the children. That's why God says he hates divorce. That's why God says, what I've joined together, don't you dare separate. Don't you realize that when you try to separate what I have put together, it can ruin both of you? Okay? Andy Stanley said it this way, you can't un-one something that's been made one. You can't un-one something that has been made one. I mean, when you take a man and a woman and you one them together like gluing 2 pieces of paper together, if you try to separate it, what happens? Both pieces are destroyed. And you leave pieces of the other person with you wherever you go. You don't separate, because what God has made one, you cannot separate. You just can't. And so he's saying, don't do that. You can't un-one what I've made one. So do you understand this? When you say, I do, you're saying, I do forever. Okay? And again, don't go to that abuse thing. A lot of people just dismiss this and go, well, my situation, no. Unless you're in an abusive situation, your situation is no different. All of us have challenges in marriage. My marriage has challenges. Your marriage has challenges. The people who are going to get married, your marriage is going to have challenges. For newlyweds, your marriages will have challenges. We all have challenges in our marriage. But the problem is the world has a different perspective about marriage, and they look at marriage as if it's some kind of contract. But here's the truth. Marriage is a covenant, not a contract. Okay? Marriage is a covenant, not a contract. A contract is based on mutual distrust. And a covenant is based on mutual commitment. There's the difference, okay? A contract is based on mutual distrust. Think about that for a moment. Anybody here, well, Sam, you have rentals, don't you, Sam? Do you have people sign a contract? Why do you have people sign a contract? Okay, what's expected of each other? We sit down and we write a contract. Remember, a contract is based on distrust. Okay? I distrust you, therefore, I'm going to give you a contract. And the contract specifies what you must do and what I will do. And if either of us break that contract, we don't do our part, we separate from each other, right? You no longer rent from me, I'm going to kick you out. Or I no longer want to rent from you because you're not honoring your side of what's going on. And sometimes it even ends up in a court of law, because the contract is broken. And so it's saying, I don't trust you, therefore I have to have a contract with you. God says, that's not how you do marriage. Marriage isn't a contract. It's not based on distrust, it's based on mutual commitment to each other. Because marriage is a covenant, which is wholly different. Okay? There's no prenup in God's eyes. This is something that we have a covenant relationship with each other. In a contract, there's an end date. In a covenant, there is no end date. Okay, the covenant is in effect. It's in effect forever. That covenant, that comes from the word berith in the Hebrew, and it means a cutting. You say, well, what's a cutting got to? Doesn't that mean separating? No, that's not what it means. It also means a binding agreement or a blood covenant. And what they used to do when they would enter into a covenant relationship, like in a business relationship, they would take a bull, they would kill the bull, split it in half, lay the halves on both sides, and you and the person you're making a covenant with would walk through those halves 7 times. That's what they did. They walked through it. And basically what they were stating to each other was, if I break this covenant, whatever happened to this bull, may it happen to me. That's how strong the covenant relationship was. And in marriage ceremonies, instead of walking through a bull that's been split, they would take the hands of the husband and the wife, and they would cut the hand and make it bleed. So they would cut the man's right hand, they would cut the woman's left hand, they would put those hands together and let the blood begin to mingle, because they believed that life was in the blood and you were going to share your life because the two become one flesh. And then the priest would take and bind the hands together as part of the ceremony to represent what God has made one. You can't on one, because the two now have become one flesh together. And you don't take it apart. You can't take it apart, because you have a covenant relationship with each other that says we will not separate. Okay? That's why if you haven't done this, I'm not criticizing you, but if you're going to get married today, if you're considering marriage, that's why you need to get married by a pastor, in my opinion, so you can get a spiritual component to your marriage. You need to do that for a reason, because you're making a covenant before God. I often say you ought to do it in the church because you're making a covenant before God. This isn't a covenant between friends or family members. You make a covenant relationship before God that the two are becoming one flesh, and I am committed to you for the rest of my life, so long as we what? Both shall live. Until we are separated by death, this covenant is in effect, and we will not dissolve it. No matter what. No matter what. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. So help me God. And I can tell you, when we take that seriously, it makes all the difference in the world. Dora and I decided, I've told you this many times, when we got married, divorce was taken out of our vocabulary. Divorce was never an option. We would always find some other option, but it was never going to be divorce, because we made a covenant relationship with each other. We were committed to each other. That doesn't mean you don't have struggles. In fact, one time, Ruth Graham, Billy Graham's wife, she died unfortunately before he did, and he died just a few years ago, just a great man. Someone was interviewing Ruth Graham once and asked, because she said, I know that, Billy's gone like 6 months at a time. And there you are at home raising kids while he's out doing stuff for 6 months at a time. Did you ever consider divorce? And I loved her answer. Here's what she said. Divorce, no. Murder, yes. Okay? I love that answer. But in her mind, nope, divorce is off the table. Okay, I kill him, but I'm not going to divorce him, because it's till death do we part, right? But I thought, that's how real it is. It's just not the answer. Divorce is not the answer. But I'm not happy. I don't trust her. I don't trust him. I don't love him. I don't really love her. Getting divorced because you ran out of love is like selling your car because you ran out of gas. How stupid is that? When your car runs out of gas, what do? You refill the tank. When you feel like you've ran out of love, what do? You refill the tank. You find a way. You do the things that we talked about. You do what? You seek God, right? We seek God. That's how we do it. We learn to fight fair. We do that. We have fun with each other. We do those things. We stay pure. And when we do those things, we begin to fill the tank, especially that closeness to God. If we are wholly seeking God as a couple together, God will fill that love tank again. He will do it, Because our God is a God of love, and if I'm filled with God, then I am filled with love, and I will love my spouse. And dare I say, if you tell me that you love God, but you don't love your spouse, you are not a follower of Jesus Christ, period. You can't say that. Because God's love fills you to love anyone He puts in front of you, especially the person you've entered into a covenant relationship with. So you can get through anything. You can get through anything. You never, ever give up. It's the closeness to God that sustains the love. It's the closeness to God that refills the tank and gets you where you need to be. And with that as a basis, I just want to talk about a simple principle that affects marriages. It affects a lot of our life, but it really affects marriage, and it's about reaping what you sow. Okay? Sowing and reaping has a lot to do with marriage. Galatians chapter 6, verse 7 says this. Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man what? Reaps what he sows. You reap what you sow. The one who sows to please his sinful nature, from that nature will reap what? Destruction. In other words, if I'm self-centered, it's all about me. If I want gratification from myself, self-gratification, if I make it all about me, if I'm narcissistic to the nth degree, I reap destruction, especially in my marriage. That's what it's saying. The one who sows to please the Spirit, from the Spirit will reap what? Eternal life. Something completely different. Therefore, let us not become weary in doing good, for at a proper time we will reap a harvest if I say, I don't love you anymore, so I need someone new. Or I'm just tired of fighting for this relationship, so it's over. No, if I do not what? Give up. You don't give up. You don't give up in marriage. And it says in a proper time. And so here's what I see so often. People give up on their relationships long before they should, and they don't see what could have possibly happened. Survey after survey has been done for years and years and years, surveying couples about, are you happy with your decision to get divorced or to stay together? And almost 95+% of those who divorced said, I wish I would have stuck with it. And 95% of those who stuck together said, I'm glad I didn't divorce. I'm just really happy. When I hear people say, oh, that divorce was the best thing that could ever happen to me, I look at them and say, you're a liar. Okay? Unless it's an abusive relationship and all that, take that aside. That's off the table today. We're not talking about abuse. Regular relationships. There's nothing good that comes from divorce. Nothing whatsoever. Nothing good comes from it. So he says, you can reap a harvest because maybe you're not there yet. It's not the proper time yet. But in the proper time, God will heal you and help you to thrive in your relationship if you don't give up. Just don't give up. So the principles here are pretty clear. The first thing is you reap what you sow. You reap what you sow. So it's simply this. If you plant a pear seed in the ground, are you going to grow an apple tree? What are you going to grow? A pear tree with a partridge in it because it's Christmas time. Okay? I have no idea. I've never seen a partridge in a pear tree. Is a partridge, that's a bird, right? Okay, don't you shoot those and eat them? Aren't they good for hunting? Yes, I thought so. I've never seen a partridge, though. I saw the Partridge Family when I was a little kid. Yeah, the older people get that. You guys are going, it's the Partridge Family. I don't know what that is. It was a TV show. Anyway, you're going to, if you plant one thing, you can expect that's what, you're not going to go, oh, I planted this, and over here I get this. You don't. You get what you plant. You reap what you sow. If you smile at someone, likely what's going to happen? They're going to smile back. Okay, right? If someone smiles at you, you will probably smile at them. If someone peels the banana at you, you know what I'm talking about, right? The one-finger salute that people give when they're angry towards each other. As a Christian, what do? We give them grace. and we stay calm and we don't get upset. But inside, what are we doing? I want to do the very same thing back to you because my nature says let's do that. If we don't do it, we constrain it. But we get whatever we sow, that's what we're going to reap. It's going to come back to us, whatever that happens to be. So if we sow grace in our relationship and we sow courtesy and we sow thoughtfulness, what do we get in return? The very same things. They come back at us because we're going to reap whatever we've sowed. But if we're sowing criticism and we're being controlling and we're complaining, we're going to reap defensiveness from the other person. It's going to happen. You reap whatever it is you sow in your relationship. And guys, I want to help you understand something. Women, please do not take this as some kind of sexist, offensive statement, but women are multipliers. Okay? And what do I mean by that? Women can take so much that's little and make so much out of it in good ways, not bad ways. Sometimes it might be bad ways, but most of the time it's good ways. Like, for example, you get married and she comes into your bachelor pad to live now. She'll take that bachelor pad and she'll take all that goofy stuff off the walls and change things around, and she'll take that bachelor pad and turn it into what? A home. It'll look pretty. It'll look nice. Things will be in order. The women are multipliers. They're able to do that kind of stuff. You give them Spam, and they'll make you a feast. I mean, I don't know how women do it. I mean, we can live on one thing. They'll just do, this is just something that women do because they are multipliers. They take a little and make a lot out of it. It's a great thing. Guys, if you give your spouse flowers and attention and just, give them affection, you're going to get some belly-to-belly time. Just saying. Okay, isn't that true? Don't you feel much more romantic if your husband's treating you nice and you get flowers for no reason and something happens? And then they multiply and give you children. Men can't do that because women are what? They're multipliers. But if you give them dishonor and complaint, they're going to give you hell in return. It's going to happen. Why? Because women are multipliers. And it's not a bad thing. It's what makes women special. But it's true. You reap what you sow. You give them a hard time, what do you think, guys, is going to come back to you? So let me challenge you with this thought. I didn't put it in the handout, but I think you ought to write it down. So I'm going to say it, and then I'm going to say it again. And I want you to hear me. If you don't like what you're getting, look at what you're giving. Okay, write it down. If you don't like what you're getting, look at what you're giving. If you don't like what you're getting from your spouse, look at what you're giving to your spouse. I would probably guarantee you, in almost every situation, you aren't giving the things that you wish you could get. Because you reap what you sow in a relationship. So what does that mean? If you're not getting what you think you should, then look at yourself and say, what do I have to change about me? What is it that I'm doing? Am I sowing love? Am I sowing affection? Am I sowing concern? Am I sowing gentleness in the relationship? If I'm not, why would you dare expect something different coming back at you? So change it. You don't give up and say, I guess we've run out of love. No, you look at yourself and say, what have I been sowing? And now I'm going to sow the right things. Because it is never wrong to do the right thing in a relationship, ever. And sooner or later, you will reap what you sow if both people are focusing on God. Okay? If you understand that. Without that equation, without God being the center, this stuff doesn't work. If anybody but God is center and your spouse is number two, this will not work. But when you have God as the center and your spouse is your number two and you and your number two seek number one in life together, God will take what you reap and multiply it, and you will sow more than you could ever, whatever you sow, you'll reap more than you could ever imagine in a relationship because that's what God does. But you got to put Him first. You got to put your spouse second, and you can't intermingle those things. You can't change that order. If you do, you mess up your relationship. This is God's dynamic, not mine. So first, you reap what you sow. Secondly, you will reap where you sow. Wherever you sow, that's where you're going to reap. Okay? If I plant a seed over here, I can't expect a tree to grow over here. Just not going to work. I can't go over here and I'm going to plant the seed here and expect it to come up over there. You need to reap, you will reap where you sow. And what does that mean? If you are investing all your passion in your hobbies, I'm really into woodworking like I like woodworking, and I'm really into hunting like some people are into hunting, and you sow all your passion and all your energy into your hobbies, what's going to happen to your relationship? If you take and sow all of your passion into your children, and that's probably the greatest mistake I see parents making today, that they've forgotten the equation that God gave us. God first, spouse second, and they've made it God maybe first, but kids second, and it's all about their kids. And if you make it all about your kids, you're putting your kids in a place they don't belong. They come after your spouse, okay? Our kids we don't exist for our children exist for us. I want you to hear that, okay? They exist for us. Who did they come from, for heaven's sakes? They came from us. So it's not life all about my kids. It's life all about God, all about my spouse, and then about my children. And when I get that equation out of whack, my marriage suffers because I'm going to reap wherever I sow. And if all my attention is on my kids and I'm ignoring my spouse, I'm going to damage my relationship with them. It's just going to happen. So you got to remember to get that in the right order. If you're investing in your career and you're spending X amount of hours over in time and all the stuff is about work and your job and getting ahead and getting the promotion or whatever it is, you're going to hurt your spouse. You're going to damage your spouse because the priority, now you've got God maybe first, and maybe it's your job that's first now, but your wife or your husband isn't second anymore. And you can't do that. You will reap where you sow. Where are you sowing in your relationship? You'll get a harvest wherever you invest. And if you're investing in your spouse, you will reap a harvest. If you're putting your attention and your thoughts on your spouse, in fact, the way I try to teach it to people is that who has my back? If my wife has my back and she's always looking out for me, I never have to look out for myself, which frees me to always look out for her. So she never has to look out for herself. And I always have someone looking out for me, and I never have to demand my rights because my wife is already giving me everything I need because she has made me number 2 in her life, and she is honoring me every day by thinking about me before her. It works. And she's investing in me, and I'm investing in her. That means we're investing in our relationship together. Therefore, we never talk about divorce. Why would we? I only know one person on this planet that has my back no matter what, and that's my wife, Dora. I love all you guys, but honestly, given the right circumstances, you would turn your back on me in an instant. I love you, but it's true. There's a fine line between love and hate, and it only takes one incident to cross that line. But with my wife, she will never, ever give up on me. It's the most attractive thing about her. Because she's invested in me, and I'm investing in her. And we've celebrated 47 years together because we've invested in each other. And we didn't do this good at the beginning. We were lousy at it. We were self-centered little snots. I was the last born, she was the last born. We were both babies, and we acted like it. But we have learned to put the other person first. And we've learned to put God in the center. We've learned to seek Him together. We've learned how to fight fair. We have. We've learned how to have fun. We've learned how to stay pure and put boundaries around our relationship. And we never, ever, ever give up. But some of you are right there now where you have misplaced your priorities and your marriage is struggling. What do you do? What do you do if that's the case? God is my 1, my spouse is my 2. I choose the right priority in my marriage. And here's a truism, and people hear this. You might even want to write this one down too. Okay? Your marriage is as good as you decide it's going to be. Your marriage is as good as you decide it's going to be. So what have you decided? Do you want a healthy, thriving, vibrant, supportive relationship? Then you sow a healthy, vibrant, thriving, supporting relationship. And you will reap what you sow, and you will reap where you sow it. And you get to decide how good or how bad your marriage is going to be. That is your choice, as long as you are seeking God together first, and you're fighting fair, and you're having fun, and you're staying pure, and you choose never, ever, ever give up. Never give up. It takes both of us, husband and wife, as one. You can't unone what God has made one. So you fight for that relationship. You hold tight to that relationship. You keep the priorities straight in that relationship. So today, you may as well decide what kind of marriage you have and what kind of marriage you want. Because whatever you decide, that's what it's going to be. That's what it's going to be. And you might be saying, some of you right now, well, I don't feel like being nice anymore. They're never nice to me. I don't feel like forgiving. I don't feel like working on it. Can I honestly ask you a question if you're saying those things in your mind? How many other areas of life can you get away with saying something like that? Where else can you say something? Can you say, I don't feel like feeding my baby anymore? Can you get away with that? I just don't feel like it. It's such a pain in the hiney. No, you can't do that. You have to feed your child. You don't have an option to give up on that. Well, I don't feel like working anymore. How's that going to work for you? How long are you going to have a job, and how long are you going to have an income, and how long are you going to survive? You don't get to say, I don't feel like it anymore. We don't get the right to do that. I don't feel like paying my taxes. See how far that gets you when the IRS comes after you. What's your excuse? Well, I just didn't feel like it. Okay, you can go to prison. That's called tax fraud because you didn't report your taxes. You want to do that? Can you get away with it? Why do we think we can get away with it in a marriage? Well, I just don't feel like it anymore. It's not about your feelings. You made a covenant. You made a covenant. Despite how you feel, it's irrelevant. You made a covenant with God and your spouse to never, ever give up until death do we part. Period. So from this day forward, doesn't matter where you've been in your relationship, from this day forward, we will never, ever give up. We will always find a way. We're never going to give up on striving to have a God-honoring marriage, a marriage blessed by God, because we're going to put Him first. We're not going to stop seeking God, and we're not going to stop fighting fair, and we're not going to stop having fun, and we're not going to stop being pure. We're going to do all those things because we made a covenant relationship with each other. I am never, ever, ever, ever giving up on it. First and foremost, because it honors my God, my number one. And secondly, it honors my number two, my spouse. So I don't give up. And in due time, you will reap a harvest. You will, because God said so, if you don't give up. And just imagine what that harvest could look like. And for too many people, they don't get to see the harvest because they gave up too soon. But those who have seen it through and gone through the storms together have seen the harvest afterwards. One of the most important lessons I learned early on was that marriage and conflict go hand in hand. And if you really want deep intimacy in your marriage, the only way you get there is through the tunnel of conflict. Too many people walk into that dark tunnel of conflict and they look back the other direction instead of seeing the light that's at the end of the tunnel. But when you get to the other end of the tunnel, what do you find? Intimacy with each other. Because you've learned something and you've grown. Because you did not give up. And when you do this, you will have a testimony to the world. You'll be the person that people can say, I want a marriage like their marriage. How did you get through that? I need your help. You're going to have this testimony that just shows that God is who He says He is. And that when I honor Him first, good things happen. Good things happen no matter what. So we do not give up. Because it says, let us not become weary in doing good, for at a proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. So the commitment Dora and I made to each other, the commitment you should make to each other is we do not give up because we made a covenant. Take everything I've taught, everything that Ken helped teach over the last 5 weeks, put it together, and you have a formula for success. A God-honoring marriage where, yes, you get to have fun. It is fun. I can't imagine doing life without my wife. I just can't. I don't want that to ever happen. I know someday it will. She will either lose me or I will lose her. My prayer is we both die at the same time. Honestly, if that's going to happen, I think we'll just drive off a cliff together. Okay? Because I don't want to have life without her. She's my friend. She's my number 2. She's my joy. She is my life after God. What about you? Your marriage will be good as you decide it to be. What will you decide today? Are you going to give up or are you going to honor the covenant? I say, do it God's way. Let's pray. Gracious Father, thank you today for being the God that is the God of good things, not bad things. God, I do know, and I'm not blind by reality. I know marriage is struggle. I know you take 2 opposite people and put them in the same room together. That's a formula for real disaster at times. But it's also an opportunity to learn how to love, to learn how to extend grace, to enjoy the differences and celebrate them, not condemn them. But you make that possible, God. So I pray today for each person that's here that you would show them the possibilities that come through saying, no, I'll never, ever give up. Never. I made a commitment. No, I made a covenant with you. And I'm in for good. God, you made a covenant with us through your Son. He died on a cross to give us a new covenant. And he said, I will never leave you or forsake you. May we say the same to our spouse. I will never leave you or forsake you. God, give us the courage to not give up. Give us the strength to walk through. Give us the joy that comes from a healthy marriage in you. And God, I pray you would magnify those joys and that you would minimize the struggles. But in all things, may we hold tight to you because, God, you are the one that sustains us. Father, we say this in Jesus' holy name. Amen.